Have you ever noticed how your parents complain that things were so much cheaper when they were young, while your grandparents insist their generation had it even tougher? Meanwhile, you're sitting there wondering how anyone your age is supposed to afford anything at all. Well, here's the thing that nobody wants to admit. Every single generation for the past century has felt economically worse off than the one before it. And that's not just some weird psychological trick or nostalgia playing games with our memories. The numbers tell a story that most economists don't want you to hear. Each generation is genuinely facing financial challenges that their parents never had to deal with. But here's where it gets really interesting. The reasons why each generation feels poorer are completely different from what you might expect. And understanding these reasons will change how you think about your own financial future forever. Now, before we dive into crushing everyone's hopes and dreams, there's something you need to understand about how this whole economic betrayal actually works. Most people think that feeling poorer is just about inflation or wages not keeping up with costs. But that's only scratching the surface. The reality is that the entire structure of what it means to build wealth has been fundamentally altered every 20 to 30 years for the past century. Think about it this way. Your great-grandparents could buy a house for 3 times their annual salary. Your grandparents needed 5 times their annual salary for the same thing. Your parents stretched that to 7 times. And now you're looking at 10 to 12 times your annual salary just to get a starter home in most decent markets. But that's not even the most insidious part. The game keeps changing in ways that make previous generations' strategies completely useless. Your great-grandparents could work at the same company for 40 years, get a pension, and retire comfortably. Your grandparents saw those pensions disappear, but could still rely on Social Security and their home equity. Your parents watched Social Security benefits get cut while home equity became a casino game. And you're stuck trying to figure out how to retire on a gig economy income while student loans eat half your paycheck. Each generation gets handed a completely different economic rulebook, but everyone keeps using the advice from the previous rulebook. It's like trying to play chess with checkers rules while someone keeps moving the board around. No wonder everyone feels like they're losing. But here's what makes this phenomenon truly fascinating. The things that made previous generations feel wealthy are exactly the things that make current generations feel poor. When your grandparents bought their house for $15,000, they felt like they were taking on massive debt. That same house now costs $800,000, and your grandparents feel wealthy because of the appreciation. Meanwhile, you can't even afford the down payment. This creates a psychological trap where older generations genuinely believe younger people just need to work harder or make better choices. After all, they managed to buy a house, start a family, and build wealth on a single income. What they don't realize is that the economic landscape has shifted so dramatically that their success strategies are not just outdated, they're actually counterproductive in today's market. The scariest part is that this trend is accelerating. The gap between what each generation needs to do to achieve basic financial security is getting wider and wider. What took your parents 5 years to save for now takes 15 years. What required a high school diploma for your grandparents now demands a college degree and 2 years of unpaid internships. And the worst part is that the next generation is going to face challenges that make today's problems look like practice rounds. So why does this keep happening? Why does every generation end up feeling like they got dealt a worse hand than their parents? The answer isn't what most people think. It's not corporate greed, it's not government policy, and it's not generational laziness. The real culprit is something much more fundamental about how modern economies evolve. Every time society solves one economic problem, it creates 3 new ones. When we figured out how to mass-produce cars, we created suburban sprawl and commuting costs. When we made college education more accessible, we created credential inflation and student debt. When we developed global supply chains, we created job insecurity and wage stagnation. Each solution becomes the foundation for the next generation's problems. But there's something even more disturbing hiding beneath all of this. The mechanisms that previous generations used to build wealth are not just harder to access now. They're actually working against younger people. The systems that were designed to create prosperity have been quietly converted into wealth extraction machines. And if you think the current situation is unsustainable, wait until you see what's coming next. The housing market is just the beginning of this wealth extraction system. Consider what happened to retirement savings. Your great-grandparents didn't need to worry about retirement planning because their companies handled everything through defined benefit pensions. Your grandparents got caught in the transition and ended up with a mix of diminishing pensions and the early days of 401k plans that actually worked pretty well. But here's where things get really twisted. The 401k system that was supposed to democratize retirement investing has become a fee harvesting operation. The average American loses more than $200,000 over their career, just to management fees and expense ratios that didn't exist when pensions were the norm. You're not just responsible for funding your own retirement, you're also subsidizing an entire industry built around managing your money poorly. Meanwhile, the stock market that previous generations used to build wealth has been fundamentally altered by algorithmic trading and institutional manipulation. When your grandparents bought stocks, they were actually investing in companies. Today, you're mostly just providing liquidity for high-frequency trading algorithms that extract profits from every transaction you make. The same pattern shows up everywhere you look. College education used to be a path to the middle class. Now it's a debt trap that requires you to mortgage your future just to qualify for jobs that pay less in real terms than they did 40 years ago. The student loan system has become so profitable that universities have every incentive to keep raising prices, while employers have shifted the cost of job training onto individual students. Even the job market itself has been restructured to extract value from workers rather than provide stable employment. The gig economy sounds like freedom, but it's really just a way for companies to avoid paying benefits while shifting all the risks of business ownership onto individual workers. You get to be an entrepreneur with none of the upside and all of the downside. This isn't happening by accident. Each generation's prosperity gets systematically converted into the next generation's cost of living. The wealth your parents built by buying real estate cheap has made real estate unaffordable for you. The stable jobs your grandparents enjoyed were shipped overseas to boost corporate profits that you'll never see. The social safety net they relied on has been privatized into services you have to pay for individually. What makes this particularly insidious is how it's disguised as progress. Every generation gets told that new innovations will make life better and more affordable. The internet was supposed to democratize information and create new opportunities. Instead, it created winner-take-all markets dominated by a handful of platforms that extract rent from every digital transaction. Smartphones were supposed to make communication cheaper and more efficient. Instead, they created subscription-based everything and turned your attention into a commodity that gets sold to advertisers. Even the sharing economy that promised to let people monetize their assets has become a way for venture capital to subsidize services until they achieve monopoly status. The most disturbing part is that this system has become so sophisticated that it can extract wealth from multiple generations simultaneously. Older generations feel wealthy because their assets have appreciated, but that appreciation is only possible because younger generations are forced to pay inflated prices for basic necessities. It's a wealth transfer system disguised as a free market. And the pace of this extraction is accelerating exponentially. The time between economic disruptions keeps getting shorter, while the magnitude of each disruption keeps getting larger. Your parents had decades to adapt to changes in the job market. You're expected to reinvent your career every 5 years, while also somehow saving for retirement and paying off student loans. The next generation won't even get that much stability. They're looking at a future where artificial intelligence eliminates entire categories of work. The economic challenges you're facing today will seem quaint compared to what they'll have to navigate. But here's what nobody talks about when they discuss these generational wealth transfers. There's a very specific group of people who benefit every time a new generation gets squeezed. And understanding who they are and how they operate is the key to breaking out of this cycle. So here's what you need to understand about your financial future. This generational wealth extraction system isn't some natural economic law that can't be changed. It's a series of policy choices and market structures that benefit a very small group of people at the expense of everyone else. The same financial institutions that sold your grandparents on pensions are now selling you on individual retirement accounts. The same real estate interests that helped your parents build equity are now lobbying to keep housing artificially scarce. But recognizing the game is the first step to changing the rules. Every generation before you thought they had to play by the existing economic playbook. They assumed that working harder or making smarter choices within the system would be enough. What they didn't realize is that the system itself was designed to extract wealth from them over time. You have something previous generations didn't have, though. You can see the pattern. You understand that the traditional path to prosperity has been systematically dismantled, and that awareness gives you the power to build something different. The question isn't whether you can afford to buy into the existing system. The question is whether you can afford not to create alternatives. The next decade is going to determine whether this cycle of generational wealth extraction continues or whether your generation becomes the one that finally breaks it. Either way, understanding why every generation feels poorer than the last is your first step toward making sure the next generation doesn't have to ask the same question.